the solar system we see today is not how it was in the relatively recent past. But then came what I call the schism, a massive distortion in the information waveform construct of this reality. And as this distortion happened, there was a distortion in, as I talked about earlier again, the electromagnetic forces that hold the planets and planetary bodies in some kind of stable orbit, and a lot of these planets went walkabout. This is a book called The Saturn Myth by a researcher called David Talbot. It's probably the best book on ancient symbolism that I've ever come across. It's absolutely first-class research. Came out some years ago now. And from his massive, detailed research over many, many years of ancient accounts and descriptions and symbols, he found all these common themes relating to the fact that what we today call Saturn was not where it is now and was not what it is now in terms of the rings and what have you, but was much, much closer to the Earth, to the point that it was in terms of, because it's not a planet, Saturn, it's a dwarf star, so is Jupiter. And it was the prime source of light as the solar system was before this great distortion, this great cataclysm. And looking from the Earth, you saw Venus, and in the middle of that you saw Mars. Therefore, Saturn became absolutely the center of focus of Earth's society before all this happened. Saturn, which I say didn't look like that in those days, and Jupiter was certainly involved in these cataclysms. And the effect on the Earth is one of the great universal themes in every ancient culture. Of course, we have the classic coming through the Bible of the great flood and Noah and what have you, but that is just a rewrite of more ancient texts in Mesopotamia, and it's the same theme all over the world, a fantastic geological and cataclysmic events that basically brought the society that was there then to an end. That's Avatar society that I was talking about. And when you look at it, you look at some of the great earth upheavals that we've had, things like the tsunami in Japan and great earthquakes. Now, they're devastating. I mean, the tsunami was unbelievable in Japan, and also the one earlier that was massively destructive. But at least there was the ability of people unaffected to come and help. When you have a global cataclysm like the one all these ancient accounts describe, then there ain't no one coming, because everyone's in the same situation. And if that happened today, very soon, first of all, what we call civilization will be over. Electricity, gone. Everything to do with electricity, gone. Oil, anything to do with it, gone. It would immediately become a primitive society from the perspective of today. And soon, the knowledge of the more advanced society that was destroyed would be lost, and it would only be passed over in myths and stuff like that. And of course, it has been. Endless stories about great continents, which people call Atlantis and Mu or Lemuria, in the Pacific and the Atlantic, crashing under the waves in this great cataclysm. And under the sea around the world are certainly some extraordinary buildings and cities that were once above the surface of the water. Now, as I mentioned in the first half, the base construct of this universe is waveform information. So any distortion at that level, and this is where the whole thing was created from, this massive cataclysmic event, will play through to the holographic as great distortions that we will see as great geological and weather events. And it was at this point that the solar system became eventually what it is now. And a lot of researchers into this area of the cataclysm look at the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter and say, well, their view, they may well be right, that that's the remnant of some planet or planets that operated in that area. before the great cataclysm. So when it happened, the crazies moved in. This force that I'm talking about, that I say, and many of the ancient texts say, were behind the creation of this cataclysm. Not only that, because the mind also works in this waveform level, any distortion at that level will distort human perception, will distort the human mind. And we went from, when I say we, I mean humanity, went from a connected society, an open, aware, expanded consciousness society, into the one that eventually became the controlled society, and even more controlled society that we see today. And these entities were behind it. And the heart interaction also was a victim of this great cataclysmic happening. Because what happened, not least because of the distortion, but also because of the impact of these entities, we moved from being a heart-centered, heart perception society into the gut. When you go from the heart vortex, the heart electromagnetic field, you go out of the bounds of time and space, the illusion, into the greater understanding of self. So this hijack more and more closed that connection down, and we became a five-sense society overwhelmingly, and therefore locked in to this tiny band of frequency we call visible light, and at the expense of the wider perception that this is just part of who we are, not the totality of it. And more, the body-mind level got disconnected from the greater consciousness level, and once that happens, then we're in real trouble. We then start to see this as the only reality, instead of realizing that this is the totality and the infinity of what we are beyond this tiny band of frequencies we call the world. Now, these entities I'm talking about are talked about and mentioned in every ancient society under different names. And these are interesting to me. This is what they're called by some Central American shaman, the flyers, just a name. We have the demons in Christianity. We have the archons, that is the name for these entities of the Gnostic belief and the Gnostic writings from like 2,000 years ago, around that period and later. And the Islamic jinn. Because the way all of these entities or phenomenon are described is precisely the same, in effect. They're different names for the same thing. And the archons, as the Gnostics called them, were said to be made from luminous fire. The jinn from Islamic and pre-Islamic Arabia were said to be made of smokeless fire. And when you look at what's said about, they're talking about the same force, the same phenomenon. So what is it? This is what they talk about in these writings. They talk about the Lord Archon, or what they call the demiurge, and the archons that serve the demiurge and the Lord Archon, as they call him. And they relate this to the Judeo-Christian Yahweh Jehovah God. They also relate it, in effect, to what people call Satan or the devil as well. They say that these archons created the physical universe that we see, but not the earth, the sun, or the moon. And it's interesting that those three bodies have tremendous connections geometrically and mathematically, which none of the other planets do. Anyway, Archon means prince, ruler, authorities, and it has the connotation also of being from the beginning, because the Gnostics said that actually from the beginning of this solar system that we see and experience, they have been here because they were actually the creators of it, apart from those bodies I'm talking about. They talk about the demiurge being a fake god that created the physical material reality that we perceive. And they talk about these entities being inorganic, like cyborgs, like robotic. And these writings are about 1,600 years old, a bit more maybe, and yet they knew that in terms of the relationship between the Earth and the rest of the solar system, the Earth was alive and organic, and the rest of the solar system was basically not alive and inorganic. How did they know that? Because they were able to get out there and were very, very knowledgeable. And that's why they were attacked by that which didn't want that knowledge circulating. This, in effect, is very much the feeling of what they describe as an archon world, because the archons have no creativity as humans do, and therefore their world is stark and ugly and uniform. This is another wonderful symbolic picture of an archon world, an archon reality. And that's because these writings say they have no, I think the direct translation is no intentionality. I put it another way, no creative imagination. And the writings from best part of 2,000 years ago make it clear that they envy humans who have this creative imagination, this the ability to create. Like I say, they describe the archons as cyborgs, a robotic race that can imitate but not innovate. They call it, in a translated word, counter-mimicry. Put simply, if you gave them a blank sheet of paper, they would know what to do with it. But you give them a sheet of paper, rather, with something on it, with something created on it, and they are able to distort it and twist it. But they can mimic and imitate, they cannot create in that sense. Interestingly, they also use the word fantasia. And in that sense, what they're saying is that these archons, jinn, different names, but I'll use the word archon as a consistent, have the ability to create fake realities, to distort reality, counter-mimicry, to give people the view or the feeling of a perception that seems real but isn't.